What is up, basketball fans? Welcome to the NBA Outlet. I'm your host, Nick Fay. With me, as always, Kory Waldron, and regular guest on the show, Jay Christian. Guys, how we doing?
What up, basketball world? It's yours truly.
What's going on, Jay? This is not Full Access Hoops, but welcome to the NBA Outlet. And Nick, we're almost done finally. This is the home stretch. You know, it's been a roller coaster preview series compared to our last couple of years, but we're winding down finally.
We're grinding through. Today, we're talking Washington Wizards. Before we dive into that, though, quick reminder, you can find us on iTunes, Blog Talk Radio, OTGBasketball.com, Google Play, Dash Radio, and YouTube. Also head to Design Tree /Off the Glass. Use discount code OTG5. Save yourself $5 on OTG merch. But before we talk next season, we'll look back at last year. Not a great season for Washington, 32-50, 11th in the Eastern Conference. How would you summarize last season in one emoji?
So the one I was actually scrolling through the emoji options, and I found one where it's the I guess it's a girl. I'm not sure, not trying to qualify it any kind of way, but not that it matters. And it's one just of waving, like. And it's just I liked it because it made me think of that Donald Glover GIF where he walks in from Community and the apartment's on fire. I felt that was the Wizards, just like, hey, it's all fucked up here, like we're in the capital city. I mean, I thought it was just so absurd, just with all the bad luck and the injuries and everything that happened at Washington last season. I was like, yep, well, this is a dumpster fire. So, hey, outside world, this is what's going on. So I went with the waving girl or guy, long-haired emoji person waving.
So I went with the laughing emoji with like the nervous sweat drop going down the forehead, because obviously the John Wall injury, on top of the fact that that's a lot of money he's being paid, with Bradley Beal being the only bright spot, a lot of injuries, trading away Otto Porter Jr. It's just kind of like, what the hell are we doing? We've mentioned this a lot on Full Access Hoops. They didn't have a GM for the longest time. So it was one of those just years where you're just like, what the hell is this organization doing?
Yeah, I went with a straight puking emoji, and not like the pre-puke, the actual vomiting, because you guys said it. Last year was just a terrible season, and we talked about it last year. A few of us on the outlet preview series were a little high in the Wizards. I was not. I thought there was just plenty of options for things to go bad, and everything kind of went bad. But
did I say home court? I think I said home court last year.
Yeah, we had Jack and JBT Nick on, and they both were relatively high. Me, not so much. Not a big Dwight Howard guy, but that's for another show. Biggest positive takeaway, though, from last season?
Oof, that it's over. I mean, there was not a lot. I mean, I take that back. So the bad season put them in a position to draft my guy from Gonzaga. Is it
Rui Hachimura?
Yes, Rui Hachimura, who I've actually seen play, being here in the Pacific Northwest and having Gonzaga games on my television. So, I mean, if there is a situation where you can actually acquire talent, and I'm sure we'll get into additions and losses a little bit later, but especially after shipping off Otto Porter, having a player like that who I think is versatile and has a lot of upside and potential, you don't probably land on a guy like that without having a terrible season. So maybe it's not all bad, right?
Yeah, for me, the positive takeaway is Bradley Beal, which is easy. Like, this is the layup move. Bradley Beal being just 25 last year, playing in all 82 games, having shooting splits of 47, 35, and 80, averaging 25 points per game, was really just solidifying the fact that this is an elite level talent player in the NBA. I know in the OTG top 50, we had him inside the top 20. Bradley Beal is an extremely gifted player, and being able to see him obviously not be able to carry this Wizards team very far, but knowing that at least on a nightly basis, you can rely on one guy, and this is still a corner piece going forward.
Yeah, I think Bradley Beal kind of took his game to another level, and he was the only reason they were winning games was Bradley Beal. He did sign the contract extension. He won't be traded this year, but in the offseason, I think it's a real possibility, and he could bring you in a big haul. But biggest negative takeaway, if you had to say one thing?
One thing is losing John Wall. That and Nick, to your point, there was a lot of ways that this could go south, but definitely the injury bug to a guy that you've signed on that Supermax type deal is the worst case scenario, I think, for everyone but the player who signed that deal. And that, was evident with the Wizards last year. I mean, it's just not the same team with Wall, who I think is slept on as a top point guard, honestly, which is amazing to me, given his athleticism and way in which he plays the game. But losing Wall for sure was the biggest hit.
So yeah, I think that would be the biggest negative. I would say just like some of the front office moves in general.
Yeah.
Like trading away Kelly Oubre, bringing in Trevor Ariza. What was the point of that move necessarily? Why did you trade Otto Porter Jr. for Bobby Porter and Jabari Parker? Just some like questionable moves to get rid of guys. Which like, what was the purpose of them, more or less? Would be my biggest negative aside from the injury bug, because obviously, John Wall, Dwight Howard, both those guys missing majority of the season, almost all of the season, was obviously a huge negative.
Yeah, I think just touching on Wall real quick, not only did it suck he missed last season, but he's going to miss another entire season this year. And now you're moving forward to that contract, and Jay mentioned how great he was, and I'm just like concerned with his athleticism coming back. Like, you don't play basketball for 2 years, an Achilles injury is really bad, especially for a guy depending on speed. But also touching on your point, Kory, like giving up Oubre for nothing. Like Trevor Ariza was never going to push you to the playoffs. Oubre is a young player that could turn into something, and you give him away, and he was one of your only young pieces on the roster. Just really didn't make sense. And like you said, just a lot of the front office stuff was bad. But moving forward to this season, OTG Power Rankings have them in at number 26. Do you guys think this is fair, too high, too low?
Damn. As we go through this, so I got to say, I know we're moving along here, but on a previous episode of Full Access Hoops, I think I made Kory about fall out of his chair because I said I was actually interested in the Wizards, and Kory's like, bullshit. No way. So I'm laughing as we actually have to talk through this and talk about how bad the Wizards are, and I feel like I'm in this position of justifying why I feel this way. But every time, Nick, you bring up something, it's like, God damn, did that really happen last year? But I just want to get to looking forward, is my point. But 26. I actually think that's a little too low, and I think they should be ranked higher, and this is why. I think since they're playing in the East, I don't think they're in a very strong division. I mean, you're with the Hornets, you're with the Hawks, who are improving, and then you're with Miami, who I think is probably tops in that division, I would say offhand, and then you also have the Orlando Magic. So I think the division is not as tough for the Wizards, and I also think the Eastern Conference, there is a total feeling out period of what the East will look like. Like everyone's getting used to new teammates, new coaches, new scenarios. So that learning curve for all the teams in the Eastern Conference will be about the same. So I think that'll actually, pad the records. The combination of those two things will pad the records for the Washington Wizards. So I would probably have them maybe 20, 22. I mean, I don't think they're just complete cellar dwellers, but I think this year, and Tom Shepard, the new GM, has emphasized this year will be about player development, but I think they have some pieces that get them a little higher than 26.
I think 26 is I actually kind of agree with you. I think it's a little bit too low. I could see them being a couple spots higher, not much higher, because they are, but being in the Eastern Conference obviously isn't as hard of a regular season. But this is, to me, definitely a bottom 10 team, and definitely pushing and knocking on the door of being a bottom 5 team.
Wow. Yeah, I think they're probably definitely bottom 10. I would say at this spot, you can move them up 1 or 2, and the only reason I feel that way is because Bradley Beal is actually going to be there the entire season. If we had done this and he didn't get an extension, I would think he was going to be traded, and I would say you could argue they could be lower because he would be like a lock to be traded. But right now, I think the rest of the roster just is kind of bad. Like, let's just be honest here. Like, there's just not a lot of good players on this team other than Bradley Beal.
Yeah.
I mean, like, we did ranking the top 3 players on this team, Kory, remember, and it was tough.
Yeah, no, it's Bradley Beal, and you're like, like Thomas Bryant's the second best player. Like, the top 3 best players in this team, I think it's like almost interchangeable. You could probably change them like every week going through the regular season.
Yeah, you got one solidified thing in Bradley Beal, but other than that, like, I'm not really sure. I mean, there's more youth than there's been in a while, so that's a positive, but still, like, there's a lot going on in Washington, and like Jay mentioned, brought a new front office. Hopefully they can fix things up. But talking draft picks, Rui Hachimura at number 9. I know a lot of people thought this was a reach, especially our draft guys. What do you guys think about this pick?
So, like I said, I've seen Hachimura play, a lot of Gonzaga games here in Washington. I don't think it's I think so. And I remember us having a joke about this where I think the owner or the GM, they're like, "You're good, right?" Like at the presser, at the
you
draft,
can shoot threes.
like,
You can shoot threes, right?
Which was not the way to lead that presser. I don't think by any stretch of the imagination. So, but I don't think so. I don't think it was a stretch just because, like we talked about earlier, Oubre's gone. They brought back Trevor Ariza for whatever reason. Otto Porter's out, so you needed sort of, and I think of Hachimura as more of a 4 than a 3, kind of like a stretch 4 in my opinion, than being able to defend on all the elite small forwards in the league. But I don't think it was a stretch. I mean, I think he's value, and I think he has an upside that merits that pick. I mean, if you could swayed me to another pick that went maybe a few after him that should probably have been that high for the Wizards to address some needs maybe in the backcourt, I'm willing to hear that conversation, but I don't think it was just, completely, it wasn't who's my man Michael Olowokandi pick or anything like that. I mean, I think he has upside, Hachimura.
So yeah, Hachimura, I didn't know much about him besides the press conference in which, the GM was just making sure that he could shoot threes, which is, as you just mentioned, not a way to lead a press conference. But then watching him in Summer League, watching him play in FIBA, I can't remember who he played for in FIBA. It wasn't Team USA, but the guy can score. He has some really good games. He can score from a variety of places on the floor. He definitely can shoot the three, which he did prove. So I actually am a little bit higher on the pick than I was initially. But again, I don't know how much we can truly expect in this rookie season. But looking at the rest of the roster, he's going to definitely get touches. I mean, he's going to have to be a vocal point of this offense because, once again, outside of Bradley Beal, who are you going to rely on for points? I mean, CJ Miles, I don't like that. So I think there's definitely an opportunity for him to show that he can play at a high level. And I've been pleasantly pleased with what I've seen so far over the summer.
Yeah, I probably would still say it's a reach, but I think from a marketing perspective, attacking that Asian market could be something what Washington was trying to do. They have trouble selling seats, so just throwing that out there. I maybe would have went with someone like a Cam Reddish who has a really high upside, especially considering where this team is at. You need someone to pop off. I'm not sure Rui will ever be an all-star. I think Cam Reddish has that potential. I'm not saying he's going to hit it. And then also Tyler Hero would be another guy to consider. I know he's been really good for Miami so far in the preseason. Obviously, preseason, take that with a grain of salt. And they also drafted Admiral Schofield in the second round. Don't really know much about him, so we'll move on to the offseason. Players in, we got Isaiah Thomas, Ish Smith, Davis Bertans, CJ Miles, Isaac Bonga, Mo Wagner. Who do you like out of this bunch?
So, and I know he's injured. I know he's hurt. But I like Isaiah Thomas, and he's creeping his way back. And I still think, despite just the horrible, Odyssey type, and Homer's Odyssey, by the way, for all you English majors, the type of journey that Thomas has had the last few years, I still think there's basketball in him. I still think after, securing the Brinks truck and getting traded to Cleveland and LeBron shipping him out randomly and then actually showing up to where he was, it's been a weird couple of years for Isaiah Thomas. But I still think despite all that, injury, accepted, I think he's someone that can help a young team. I think he's got the sort of personality to sort of foster young guys and teach them about being pro. I think he's a guy that can obviously score it. It's just a matter of keeping him healthy and getting him on the floor, obviously. But in terms of the names you just presented me with, Nick, if I'm choosing, I'm taking Isaiah Thomas as someone who can really bridge, I think, the gap between what they're trying to do in Washington with this team, with this sort of group of young players, the ones that they want to keep around, and then get to the next level with John Wall and Bradley Beal back in the fold. So I'd say Isaiah Thomas.
Yeah, I'm going with Isaiah Thomas as well. I think that's the easy pick, but it's, none of the other names are even flashy enough to really impress me. Obviously, Isaiah Thomas, if you're looking at last year in the 12 games he played with Denver, not great, still didn't look very good. But there's hope that he can regain some sort of Boston Celtic form where he was obviously in the MVP conversation, that final year averaging 28 points per game, playing through all the diversity in the playoffs. So you hope that he can get back to that sort of dominance. Obviously, he's going to have the opportunity once he gets healthy and gets back on the floor in Washington to have that sort of workload again. But outside of that, there's just none of these guys really move the needle in which change my mind on them being big, impactful players.
I think a low-key good move was making the move for Davis Bertans, taking him on from the Spurs in a salary cap dump. But he's a stretch four, shot a really good percentage from three, expiring $7 million contract. Maybe someone makes a trade for him and you're able to pick up a late first-round pick or a second-round pick this trade deadline, which I think would be a plus. Obviously, I don't mind IT getting picked up. There's a chance he can give you some flash, help you sell some tickets. Doesn't work out. It's not like you sign him to a big contract. Other than that, Mo Wagner, Bonga, two guys you got from the Lakers for free. Maybe you take flyers on them and hope that one works out.
Forgot about Wagner.
Yeah. He's had a weird NBA career. I mean, he's only been in the NBA 1 year, but it just seems like
It's been
his name has
strange.
been mentioned a lot for a guy, no disrespect, that's not good yet. So, but departures, we got Bobby Portis, Jabari Parker, Jonathan Simmons, Jeff Green, Thomas Satoransky, Dwight Howard, Trevor Ariza. Who do you think they should have kept if they could have kept one guy?
Wait, did we say Porter?
Well, he was traded, so in the season.
Okay, all right. Yeah, okay. That's sort of a technicality. Give me that list again. Sorry,
All right,
I was going to
Bobby
say
Portis. It's all good. Bobby Portis, Jabari Parker, Jonathan Simmons, Jeff Green, Thomas Satoransky, Dwight Howard, Trevor Ariza.
You know what? Okay, so I'm going to shock you guys. I think I don't know. Maybe I'm not. Who knows? I actually think it's Dwight Howard on that list.
You shocked me.
Assuming I can't go Otto Porter, who I think is missed, but so the reason I say that is you have Beal, you have Isaiah Thomas, you have Ish Smith, Troy Brown even. So there's veterans in the backcourt, right? To a certain extent, right? Now varying degrees of success and talent, obviously, but at least you have guys that have played NBA minutes in the backcourt. The front court is still pretty young, right? We just sort of talked about that. Thomas Bryant's only been in the league a couple of years. Wagner, what the hell, right? So Hachimura's a rook, still getting used to NBA basketball. And Dwight Howard, the season before, was with Charlotte. I think he played in like 82 or 81 games, something like that. Averaged a double-double. Looks good for the Lakers. Now, what he would have been, maybe he had to bottom out to sort of have a good showing now for Los Angeles. So who knows what Howard would have been like back in the fold with the Wizards. But I actually think for their lack of depth in the front court, I'm going to shock you both and say Dwight Howard.
So I went with Thomas Satoransky.
Good pick.
I think losing out and not having John Wall for the season is a major blow. And then the rest of your point guard play, like Ish Smith is a very good backup point guard. No disrespect to Ish Smith. He's done a nice job in Detroit. Everywhere he's been coming off the bench, he gives you playmaking, but there's not a lot of shooting there. And then with Isaiah Thomas, we just don't know what he's going to be. We don't know if he's going to be unplayable once again this season. But Thomas Satoransky, being just entering his third year in the NBA this year, shooting 48% last year from the field, 39% from three. There was certainly upside with Satoransky, a guy who can run the show, can play the one or play the two. A little bit oversized too, being I think 6'7" or 6'6".
Yeah, big guard.
Right. So I think Satoransky is the guy you missed the most because your point guard play this year could be extremely, extremely bad if you're not getting production from Isaiah Thomas you're hoping to get, or if Smith is playing a little bit more in a bigger role that he's probably should be tasked with given. So I think Satoransky would be the guy I think they missed the most.
And I think he's a younger guy, so you're like, okay, I want to kind of keep him because maybe he can turn into a solid player or be my backup point guard for the next 5 years or whatever it can be. I mean, I think you make a trade for Bobby Portis and Jabari Parker, you should probably try to keep one of them. And both guys had decent moments in Washington. Not saying I have high hopes for either one, but I think if you make a trade for one, you try to keep one of these young guys. And Jay mentioned like the front court isn't great, especially the forward position. Like Rui Hachimura is going to play a lot of minutes because they essentially don't have anyone else to play at power forward other than Davis Bertans. So it's like, why not bring one of these guys back? Not saying you have to sign him to a big deal. Bobby Portis signed like a one-year deal with a team option in the second year. So they do the same thing for Washington, but they're just kind of behind the eight ball because they don't really have a ton of young talent, and the young talent they had, they just let walk away. So the direction of the franchise is just confusing. Now,
yes, yes.
I don't know if there is a direction, but that's for another.
No one's driving the direction. No one's even driving the car. No one's driving the car. It was just.
Yeah, they put the car on cruise control, and no one's behind the wheel. They're like, don't worry, the car's in cruise control. Well, that doesn't mean it's driving itself.
That happens in a movie. I don't know which one.
It's Anchorman 2. They're all in the back, and they're like, "Who's driving?" Oh, it's on cruise control. That doesn't mean it's driving itself.
Yeah, that feels Washington, and Anchorman's a good comparison if we were doing movies. But next season, biggest team X factor that's not one specific player and not health.
Player development. And I think Tom Shepard has sort of championed this, and that's one of the things he's said all the right things. First of all, he's got one of the greatest basketball movie fiction names of all time. He's Tom Shepard. It's like above the rim. He's going to show up at the Rucker, beat Tupac's team in corduroy pants, which is amazing. How did they not stop that guy from scoring 40 points? in corduroys and a long john shirt, but that's neither here nor there. But Shepard has been very adamant about developing the young guys, and we can kind of talk about this a little bit more. But I think the X factor will be sort of the long game, in the sense of, maybe we actually take a step back in terms of records, which we'll talk about in a little bit here. But the young guys are getting their minutes. Beal's filling out his teammates. You can really start to do a player evaluation standpoint from the Wizards front office perspective, to say, okay, these guys seem to fit in our long-term goals. These guys maybe not so much. How do we flip these players and get assets for them? I don't think Washington's in a full-on trust the process rebuild. I think it is a heavy evaluation year in terms of the players. So I think how they develop their young assets will be the biggest sort of X factor and key to watch out for this season.
So I'm going to go just different, because I don't want to copy your point on player development, because I think that is the huge X factor. I'm going to say offense in general, because I think the only one you can rely on for buckets consistently is Bradley Beal. And if you told me who else was going to average, the second most points per game on this team, I couldn't really tell you.
Would have been Dwight Howard, but he's gone. But,
right. Yeah. Okay. And because right now you're looking at like CJ Miles or Ian Mahinmi probably being the second best scorer, or Thomas Bryant.
I think Thomas Bryant will probably be. I think he does enough to get in garbage points. He's a good rebounder, and he'll actually consistently play. I'd make an argument he might be the most consistent guy after Bradley Beal on this roster, because you know what you're getting every single night.
Right. So for me, it's the X factor to me is going to be offense, because obviously the Eastern Conference is weaker, but not being able to put up a steady amount of points, and I'm not even sure the defense will be that good for this team. I think offense will be a big X factor.
Yeah, I mean, defense won't be good, offense won't be good. It's going to be a problem.
Cruise control. Cruise control.
We kind of hinted at this, and Jay brought up Shepard, and I think the direction of the front office, kind of clarifying things of where this team is trying to go, what they're focusing on, and the moves they make at the deadline. There's a couple pieces on the roster they maybe can move, even if it's some more second-round picks, and you take a couple flyers and guys in second round. Maybe you get lucky and you find a steal. We've seen it in the past with a guy like Draymond Green, the Knicks with Mitchell Robinson, the Nets with Rodion Crew. It's there's guys you can get in the second round that can be solid role players on your team, and some of them potentially all-stars or great players. So I think getting more draft picks should be a goal of this season. Starting lineup on opening night, though.
Oof. Oh, man. So I'd go, let's see. Okay. Ish Smith, as we talked about, is probably, getting senior level minutes and should probably still be middle management, but it's how these things go. Bradley Beal, of course. Troy Brown, I guess, at the small forward, just out of necessity. Thomas Bryant, of course, who I really like as a young player. I think, I think he's probably more of a quote unquote third fiddle than a second one. He'll be more of a second this year. But I actually do like his game. I like what he brings. And I'm actually kind of high on Thomas Bryant. And then my guy Hachimura as the starting power forward. Yep. So, yeah.
Yeah, my starting five would be Ish Smith. I think when Isaiah is healthy, if he is healthy, I think they start him just because you want him out there, I feel like. But I think it's Ish Smith to start the year, Bradley Beal at the 2. I think CJ Miles gets the nod at the 3. You go with Rui Hachimura at the 4, Thomas Bryant at the 5.
Yeah, I think there'll be a battle at small forward. Troy Brown, obviously being a young player, he'll have a chance to fight for that spot. But I could see them going with CJ Miles because they want the veteran, and at least what he's going to be on the court.
Mm-hmm.
Now, talking player to watch next season, who is it?
Jesus. So, so I think Hachimura is the easy answer because he's the rookie and you want to see how he develops. In some ways, I think Bradley Beal is the easy answer because it's Bradley Beal. But I'm going to go ahead and say Beal for this reason. He signed the extension. He's obviously, and, things can change very quickly in the NBA, obviously, with trades and the like. But at least initially, it demonstrates a commitment to what the long-term vision for the Wizards is. So I think, if Beal's out there as a gunner trying to get his stats up, one, I don't think he would have signed the extension. I think he just would have played and then forced the Wizards' hand and he would have been moved. But he actually took consideration and everything that the team's trying to do long term, wants to be the face of the franchise from what from the spin from his agent, wants to be in Washington long term. So if he takes on the role, sort of this, not unlike Kyrie this season, actually, to be honest with you, sort of using the season to gel with his new teammates, understand where they are together, how they complement each other's game, with the expectation of his other, all-star teammate being back in the fold in 2020, 2021. I think Beal's leadership will be very important on how this team develops over the course of an 82-game season.
So I went with Thomas Bryant. As Nick mentioned, Thomas Bryant probably is the second best player on this team. He's going to be given an even bigger role in year 3. Just looking at the Basketball Reference is like a projection. They're projecting Thomas Bryant per 36 minutes this year to average 18 and 10. And if he's putting up those kind of numbers, that's pretty good going forward. And you need to have, some sort of bright side outside of just the rookie and Hachimura. And I think Thomas Bryant can be that guy. I think Thomas Bryant has the potential to be a very good starting center in this league. And you're going to be leaning on some guys who don't normally get leaned on in years past. So I think Bryant would be the guy to watch, maybe coming into his own as a center, because then when John Wall comes back, you'll have hopefully a very nice pick and roll type of player in Bryant and someone you can go to down low.
Yeah, both great picks. Obviously Bradley Beal with a leadership perspective and Thomas Bryant being a young guy who's actually had some success. I'll just switch it up and go with Isaiah Thomas. Just because of the fact he's Isaiah Thomas, and maybe he can still pop off, maybe he won't. I think he's kind of the biggest wild card entering the season. Like, if he's able to score easily for you and put up points, it's going to make the Wizards a lot more fun to watch, and they'll be a lot more competitive. But if he's not very good, now you're, like Kory mentioned earlier, you're starting Ish Smith to be a starter, and he's just not a starter. He's a backup. That's been his role the entire time in the NBA.
Mm-hmm.
So, but worst case scenario for Washington?
I don't know. I mean, worst case scenario is, I guess worst case is Beal gets hurt too, and then he's out, John Wall's out, and it's just, Mo Wagner leading the charge for the Wizards this season. I think, and the wheels just fall off. I think that's the absolute worst case. I think probably what's more realistic is, at extension time, front office and Beal and his agent had a conversation about the direction of the team. We haven't talked Scott Brooks at all, actually, on this. It's kind of interesting to me because I'm not a huge fan of Scott Brooks.
Especially for a young team, I don't think he's just...
Especially for a young team. That's exactly right. I guess more realistic worst case is the vision that was laid out for Bradley Beal to get into the season. He's not seeing a lot of creativity from the coaching staff. He's not seeing a lot of creativity from the front office. And just becomes really disgruntled, and then all of a sudden you hear rumblings about him demanding a trade. That could be, I think, the worst case scenario for the Wizards because, larger view, DC's hot right now as a sports city. The Mystics won the championship, Nationals are in the World Series. They fired Jay Gruden for the Washington football team, right? So. And I just say that because I think it's just very sort of for the Wizards right now. They don't have that. What they're selling is a vision. And if I think midway through the season, it becomes readily apparent that they're not selling that vision to the fans, they're not executing on that vision, then I could see a lot of disgruntled Wizards fans. I could see a disgruntled superstar in Bradley Beal.
Yeah. So my worst case scenario, which is I think the ideal scenario, is this team just doesn't win a lot of games. We're looking at them winning, under 25 games. Maybe Bradley Beal does get hurt. Maybe these rookies don't look as good. Troy Brown doesn't take a step this past year. Thomas Bryant kind of looks like he's plateaued, and the Wizards' future looks a little bit darker.
Yeah, for me, I think worst case scenario is they're the worst team in the league. And in most scenarios, that's fine because you'll get the first pick. But with the way the front office approach this season and extending Beal, you think that they want to be somewhat competitive. So if they end up being extremely bad, it just kind of continues the perspective of the Wizards just don't know what they're doing. And that's the worst because now you can't attract free agents. Guys in the roster aren't happy and just a bad environment to be in. But best case scenario.
So best case is young talent develops. And I think again, this is a second Brooklyn Nets reference here on this, different pod. Trust me. So I like the idea of the way Brooklyn sort of developed, right? I mean, not everything was sort of a race to the bottom, trust the process like in Philly and other places that have tried to emulate that. Brooklyn said we have young players, we have guys that we've drafted and we're high on, really focused on player development, kept their powder dry in terms of free agency, and are able to land two very huge marquee players for their roster. I think Washington, best case, could do that, follow that similar path. Now, I think there's some cleanup to do behind the scenes with the books in terms of financial discipline and what they do with their salary cap. And Nick, you made a reference to playing the Asian markets. I mean, with this whole China thing, salary caps in general may be deflated a little bit in the next year or so, which will be interesting. But there's a cap piece of it, but also the player development piece. Best case scenario is maybe they're competitive and a little fun to watch. The young guys find their groove. We find, the front office finds out we've found a keeper or two in this lot of players that we can extend long term to be a part of our future. The guys that aren't really working out for us, we can get rid of them with very little cost to us, financially or otherwise. So the best case is that they're competitive, they're fun, they're a little spunky. Bradley Beal gets an All NBA nod and sets up for that Supermax, I believe. And then they're starting to set themselves up for the future, a la the Brooklyn Nets from a few years ago.
Yeah, I think best case scenario, I feel like best case scenario is like mid-30s for wins. Like, I don't think there's a lot of wins happening. But again, maybe Isaiah Thomas comes back to form and you were able to flip him to bring in more assets. At some point in time, you're just bringing in more assets to this team. Bradley Beal looks good. Some of these rookies are popping off. I think that's best case scenario.
Yeah, I think just best cases, like you guys mentioned, youth developing and also just playing competitive basketball. Like Jay mentioned, Brooklyn, like you don't go full rebuild. You try to just build your culture up. And that's something I think Washington needs to do because they're not viewed as a respected franchise in the NBA.
Mm-hmm. All right.
Now, actual prediction for the season and where do they finish in division?
So this is funny because I think they could have a better season. I think last year they were 32-50 or something egregious like that. I could see them getting a few more wins, so I'd put them at 35, and I'm betting 35 and 47 for the year. I think in that division they're behind. I think they're behind Miami, Hornets. I'd probably I'll put them third because they're so young. I mean, I feel like Charlotte or Orlando. Atlanta. I'm totally forgetting about Atlanta. So they're at least third in that division. I don't think they'll be in the cellar. I think they are third in the Southeast. Maybe Orlando creeps up on them. I have no faith in Charlotte whatsoever. But I'd say third, maybe fourth in the division.
So I have them fourth in the division now, which is a revisal because I had them third and I had the Hawks fourth. And then just going through the prep for this, I was like, no, you should have definitely prepped for this team first. I think the Wizards get 27 wins. I think they're worse than they are last year. Wow. I think the Hawks progress a lot better. I think the Hawks just have more offense, even if their defense isn't as good. I just think the Hawks are a more complete team, whereas the Wizards, it's going to be a lot of Bradley Beal, and you're going to be picking and choosing like what player might have a decent night to give them some wins. So I'm going fourth in the division with 26 wins, which is, there we go.
Kory, who's the best player in the division in your opinion?
The best player in the division?
Yep.
I think Jimmy Butler's the best. Oh, no.
You ranked Bradley Beal higher, didn't you?
It comes out. Your Honor, well, Exhibit A.
I think Jimmy Butler's in a better situation, but no, I think Bradley Beal is definitely the better player because I like Bradley Beal's offensive game a lot more than just because Jimmy Butler's not that great of an offensive player, if we're being honest. Probably a better two-way player, but if you're looking for someone who's a more complete package offensively who gives you solid defense, it's going to be Bradley Beal.
I think the biggest difference between them offensively is they're both good with the ball in their hands, but Bradley Beal is more effective without the ball because of his ability to shoot, where Jimmy Butler is kind of a sporadic shooter. So I would say Beal's the best player, but I also think that the Wizards don't have another top 100 player probably on their roster. And like Miami, at least, they got Winslow, they got Bam, they got Dragic, they have some other guys that are at least good. I'm the same with Kory here. I got them fourth in the division, 27 wins. I think it's going to be a rough year because honestly, if Bradley Beal misses any time, they're not going to win one game without Bradley Beal.
Oh my God, no. Yeah.
I don't even know if they can.
Even if they got Charlotte on a Tuesday off of back-to-back, they can't beat Charlotte.
Yeah, they go double overtime, and it's a coin flip to see who wins.
Fair.
I honestly don't know if they can score 100 without Bradley Beal, but that's for another day. League pass wise, though, how would you rate this team 1 through 10?
All right, so listen, you got to really like basketball to watch the Wizards on League Pass, or be from like the DC, Maryland area, because brother, it's probably not going to be pretty. I would rank them at a 4 for watchability. This is really I mean, this whole team, this whole year is like a fact pattern or a hypo you'd get at like Larry Kuhn's GM school or something in Vegas, right? You have this shit team and this one player that signed an extension. Go. What do you do? That's what you're watching this season. Like if you're trying to get entertainment, sort of like Zion Williamson or LeBron James or the Clippers or Golden State, not going to find that in Washington unless Washington's playing those teams I just mentioned, right? So, unfortunately or fortunately, and I know I'm waving the banner for the Wizards, but in terms of watchability, I mean, I got to put them at a 4.
For me, I went with a 2.
I knew
Oh
it.
wow, Yikes.
Yeah, and for reference,
I mean, they are professionals, Kory. I mean, shit, they do play. I mean,
if I'm gonna give the Knicks 3.5 and give the Suns a 3, and this team just has Bradley Beal, it's a 2. It's just low. I just
wait. You gave the Suns higher than you'd rather watch the Suns than the Wizards?
Yeah, because there's more promise, I think. Devin Booker, DeAndre Ayton, they do have Ricky Rubio now, can maybe help facilitate the offense to move better. I do like Bridges. Like, I think their young talent is a lot better than the young talent on the Wizards. But obviously, the Wizards have the 1 star, and I'm giving him a 2 simply because I think Bradley Beal is watchable. That's it. Maybe that's crude. Maybe that's mean. But yeah,
they're not my kids. It's fine. I just
I went with a 3 here. As usual, I'm kind of right in between the guest and Kory. So the high bar, the low bar, I'll slip right in there. And like you guys mentioned, there's just not necessarily a ton to watch. There's so many other good teams and exciting situations. And with so much parity in the league, like this is one team that's probably going to get blown out on a good basis. So I'm not going to be trying to check that out. But what would be your TV show comparison for the Wizards based off of plot or watchability?
So I think the show I had, this is a show that came out a few years ago on ABC, it's a show called Happy Endings. And the premise was this girl leaves a guy at the altar, and it's sort of a very friends like, there's 6 friends, there's 3 guys and 3 chicks. And the first season was the show trying to figure out how to will they, won't they for the entire season. Like if you watch the first season of that show, it's very much of like, how do they get back together? What's happening now? They're dating other people. This is so weird and awkward for the friends. I felt that's what the Wizards have been for the last few seasons, dating back to when they were openly recruiting Kevin Garnett to get him back to the DC area, where they thought, we'll clear this cap room. KD knows Scott Brooks. It'll be great. He'll come back and it'll be in the East. And, Garnett. Durant had no intentions or no interest in being with the Washington Wizards. The second and third seasons of Happy Ending, they found their stride as a show. And they got away from like this plot of romance and whether or not these 2 people get together, and it just kind of became more like a Always Sunny or a Seinfeld, where they're getting in all this crazy shit and they're probably really horrible people. But they found their stride and they got away from the plan that they'd already sort of prescripted for themselves in the first season, and they found their own voice within the program. It still got canceled after 3 seasons. I watched it on Hulu. I'm very disappointed in that, which is also why I picked that show, because I know you guys don't know it and not a lot of people do. And I feel that way about the watchability of the Wizards. Not anybody's going to really be following the Wizards other than Bradley Beal. But again, I think it is just an interesting case study in sort of changing culture, right? I mean, Brooklyn's again a great example of how that happened. I think Washington could be the same. Washington is this franchise with a rich basketball history dating back to the 60s and 70s. But the culture, and under Ernie Grunfeld, was just, and Michael Jordan for a brief period of time, was something that was very egregious. And now it looks like Tom Shepard is at least outwardly trying to commit to changing that culture. And, it's not going to be evident to a lot of people right now, a lot of basketball fans right now, but it will be very interesting to see what that looks like in 2 or 3 years, particularly if John Wall, if and when he's makes a full recovery and is able to get back on the court. So for those very convoluted reasons, I picked a lesser known show called Happy Endings. It's on Hulu. Check it out.
So I picked Law and Order SVU. For the comparison of the fact that when this show was in its prime and its heyday, it was Elliot Stabler and Olivia Benson, the John Wall, Bradley Beal pairing, if you will. It was very enjoyable. And then Stabler left the show, and in this world, John Wall got hurt. So then it was just the Bradley Beal show, the Olivia Benson show, and it was still solid. But then you see some of the other supporting cast members leave, like they traded away Otto Porter Jr. I know the guy who played Monk, I think was his name, left the show. Munch. Yeah, he left the show. Daniel Craig and the police captain, he left, which could be compared to, I don't know, Marsan Gortat maybe. But you saw, this transitional period, and now it's not the same as it was. You still have Olivia Benson. The Wizards still have Bradley Beal. But compared to a lot of the other new shows out, it's a little bit old. It's a little bit done. There's not just a lot of interest in it, at least not right now.
Who's Ice-T on that show? On the Wizards, who's Ice-T?
I don't know. Like Trevor Ariza?
He's on the team anymore.
He's on the team still, right? Ice-T's still there?
Well, yeah, Ice-T's still getting those checks.
Right.
Man. Yeah.
Oh, man, there's not even like a long tenured player anymore. Maybe like Thomas Bryant, I guess?
Yeah, it would either be him or Scott Brooks.
Yeah, Scott Brooks, yeah.
Well, you guys both had great comparisons. I just wanted something straight on watchability. Kind of similar to Kory, though. Big Bang Theory, I think when it first came out, was pretty good, and now it's just kind of dragged out. You can make an argument that the Bradley Beal and John Wall combo is kind of dragged out, and they should have entered a full rebuild at some point when they didn't ever get to the finals and didn't ever look like they were going to be one of those teams to win a championship. But that's all I got. Guys, anything else you want to touch on about the Wizards before we get out of here?
Ooh, I mean, have a cold one with you when you watch, is what I could say.
Yeah, I mean, enjoy Bradley Beal, enjoy some of these young players, but do not have any expectations on the outcome of games.
Yeah, it might be better to not be sober when you watch the Wizards. But guys, give yourself a shout out, and thank everybody for listening.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. You can find me on Twitter, jchris, JAYCHRS 206, on Twitter with all of my thoughts, good, bad, and otherwise.
You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at KWalHoops, KWAL Hoops. And you can also listen to me and Jay on Full Access Hoops. Once a week, we do a podcast, and that is a proud part of the OTG Basketball Podcast Network.
Gang.
Check that out. These guys do an excellent job. And as always, follow OTG on Twitter at OTG Basketball. Head to the website, otgbasketball.com. And like I mentioned, you can find us on iTunes, Blog Talk Radio, Google Play, Dash Radio, and YouTube. And also make sure you head to Design Tree for some OTG merch.
Peace out, Knuckleheads.